The wheel turns once again, bringing us to Lughnasadh, the first harvest. So tonight we are diving into the lore and the magic of Lughnasadh season, and we'll be talking about its ancient roots, the story of the god Lugh and his foster mother Tialtu, as well as ways that you can honor the sacred turning point of the wheel in your own practice. So whether you are a seasoned witch or someone who is newer to observing the Sabbats, there's going to be something for everyone in tonight's episode. So merry meet, I'm Aislin, this is Ask Aislin, and tonight we're talking about all things Lughnasadh. You can think of this as a witch's guide to Lughnasadh season. So welcome, saying hello to those who are joining us. And so make sure to say hi in the chat so that we know that you are here with us live. And we are going to jump in. We have a lot to talk about tonight. And we're going to be starting with a bit of the lore, especially for those of you who are newer to all of this. And then we will transition into some of the ways that you can celebrate. So hopefully by the time that you leave this episode, you will have some ways that you can put this forward in your own practice. And just a note before we begin and really dive in, I also want to kind of preface this episode the way I do with every Sabbat episode, is that Sabbats are seasonal energy. They are not connected to one date only, which means that if you are not able to celebrate on the exact date of Lughnasadh, there is about 5 weeks of time that you can put some of what we're going to talk about tonight into practice. So just saying hi to some of those I see in the chat. Hi, Sonia, and Andrea is here, and Adam said he finally made it back to the live. He hasn't been here in a while. Merry meet, and Nancy is here, and Melinda and Chelsea. So merry meet, everybody. So we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about this Sabbat. Personally, Lughnasadh is one of my favorite Sabbats to talk about. It's also one of the lesser known Sabbats. So a lot of people know about Samhain, they might know about Beltane, but there's a little bit less known about this one. And just saying hi to Misty as well, who's here. Merry meet, everybody. So let us dive in and let's talk about some lore of Lughnasadh. And before I talk about the lore, though, I just want to say the dates that Lughnasadh is celebrated are typically, well, it depends on your tradition, but some traditions will celebrate at sundown on July 31st to sundown on August 1st. Some traditions will celebrate from sundown on August 1st to sundown on August 2nd. Some people will just celebrate on August 1st. And then others might observe astrological Lughnasadh, which is the exact midpoint between the summer solstice and the fall equinox. And that will change every year because the equinoxes and the solstices also change every year. So while we celebrate on these more traditional days, if you want to find the exact point where Lughnasadh would be, this year it's going to be between August 7th and August 8th. So a lot of time to practice and a lot of time to celebrate. And so why don't we dive in with some lore? And we'd also love, as we go, I'd love to hear how you practice. If you have practiced Lughnasadh before, how do you observe it? How do you celebrate? And if you've tried any of the ideas I'm going to talk about tonight, we'd love to hear from you as well. So Lughnasadh is, let's first start by talking about the origin of the name. So Lughnasadh is named after the god Lugh. It's spelled Lugh, but probably the best pronunciation we can get is Lugh. He is a god who is associated with the sun and craftsmanship. He is an Irish god. He is sometimes called Lugh of the long arm. He has other epithets that when translated into English, they would mean many skilled one or master of all arts. So he is a craftsman. He is a warrior god. He is a smith. He is a poet. He is a healer. And he is a king, all wrapped into one. So when we work with Lugh, when we call him at Lughnasadh, for example, we can be calling him in any one of these forms, and our intention can be based around any one of these things that he rules over or he's known to be associated with. Now, Lughnasadh, the word Lughnasadh, it roughly translates into Lugh's gathering. So I'm going to tell you the story of where that name comes from and who Lugh is. So this is really the story of begins as the story of his foster mother, Tialtu. Now, Tialtu is a goddess who is considered to be the personification of the earth. And the myth tells us that every year she would cultivate the land, and she would create a abundance and fertility in the land so that the people would then be able to harvest the crops and they would be sustained through that long winter that would be coming eventually in Ireland. Now, in this one particular myth, she goes out to cultivate the land and prepare the land for harvest, but she overextends herself and she ends up pushing herself to the point of exhaustion, and eventually she dies and she's overcome by her work. Now, in his deep grief, Lugh decides that the best way to honor his foster mother, in some stories it tells us that he decides the best way to honor her is through this kind of festival that is what the original Lughnasadh is. Other versions of the story say that kind of on her deathbed, there's this kind of this process of time where she's dying, and on her deathbed, she tells him that this is the way she wants to be honored. Now, this first Lughnasadh that occurs after she dies, in a lot of ways, it's like great funeral games. And in some ways, people will say it's akin to the Olympics. They say there were athletes there were contests, there were feasts, and there were also a lot of food, like I said, and feats of strength. People would show their athletic prowess during it, so you could think of it kind of like the Olympics. Now here, Lugh, kind of in his form of the Golden Warrior, we can kind of look at this aspect of Lughnasadh as how can we exhibit our great physical strength at this time, right? But he is also the grateful son who is honoring the memory of his foster mother Teal'c, and he remembers the sacrifice that she made for the land, and he's also honoring his lineage. So there's all kinds of things that are packed into this one myth, which surrounds the creation of this holiday that we then as modern pagans take into the modern world. And we're going to celebrate differently than our ancient ancestors did, but still we're going to carry forward some of those themes with us. So some of those themes are a celebration of our gifts. So if you think about the first Lughnasadh and these kind of feats of strength and this athletic prowess and these games, it was about like your skills. What are you good at, right? So we celebrate the gifts that we have. Now, we will celebrate the gifts that we were given, and we will also celebrate the harvest, because it was also a harvest festival where they blessed crops, and there was this great feast at the first Lughnasadh. And so we celebrate that harvest and that abundance and that prosperity at this time as well. Now, at the same time, there's this theme of sacrifice. Now, abundance and prosperity and sacrifice are like two sides of the same coin. And we'll talk about sacrifice in greater detail later in the episode. But what was given so that the earth could be cultivated and produce crops that would sustain the people, what was given was the life of Teal'c. So we may also, and we should also, be called to figure out what does that sacrifice mean in our own lives. So to me, Lughnasadh is absent this. If a Lughnasadh celebration is absent this critical part of the holiday, I think it's missing a big point. So I always include the element of sacrifice into all Lughnasadh rituals that we personally do in our own coven. Now, there is an author named Sir Joseph Fraser. He wrote The Golden Bough in around 1897 to 1899. I can't remember the exact date, but it's around the turn of the century. And he wrote this book, which, if you've read it, you will probably agree with me. It is a very dense book. It's very long. There's a lot in it. If you're really into like kind of history and myth, it's a great book. But our modern pagan writers, many of them have read that book and they adapt some of the ideas of that book into our modern pagan practice. So in that book, one of the main themes that Joseph Fraser explored was this theme of sacrifice, and that these ancient cultures, depending on, and he studied this cultures, various different cultures, and he saw this element of sacrifice. So there would be a time, oftentimes around this August period, where a person representing the fallen god usually would be sacrificed to the land, like so ceremonially killed as a sacrifice. So this can be explained where some of this, sometimes the Christians will say that witches do blood sacrifice and things like that. Remember, this is like an ancient practice that pagan ancestors did, but also remember that Christian ancestors also sacrificed people as well. So all of our ancestors are going to be guilty of this practice at some point. Now, the idea behind this person representing the god, and sometimes in some of the stories that Joseph Fraser explored in some of these cultures, he found that it would actually be the king or someone who was sovereign, like a sovereign leader of the people, would be the one who was ritually sacrificed. But it was believed that this sympathetic magic was necessary in order for the land to give birth to all of this great harvest that was necessary to sustain the people. Now, eventually, this sacrifice was transitioned into a symbolic sacrifice. So could explain where like the burning of effigies comes from, but eventually it was turned into this symbolic sacrifice, and that's what we as modern pagans do, is this symbolic sacrifice. But I think it's important for us to know the ancient roots of where some of the traditions come from. Now, in the traditional Lughnasadh, so going back to our ancient ancestors, there was communal feasting. So after that first Lughnasadh, there were more that would continue on. There would be communal feasting, there would be athletic contests, trial marriages. So this is something that's very interesting. So you could decide to get married to someone during a trial marriage, and you would have kind of what looked like a hand fasting on at Lughnasadh at this festival, and your marriage would last for one turn of the wheel. And so it would give people the opportunity to find out if the marriage worked or not before making it absolutely official. And sometimes then at the end of that 1 year, people could kind of disband the marriage, or people could decide to then be married officially. So kind of an interesting idea. It's a shame that we don't do that in our modern cultures, because I think we'd save people a lot of grief if we did, right? I'm sure those who have been married and divorced would agree with me. But also an interesting kind of practice at Lughnasadh I wanted to share. Now, another practice that was done at some of the first Lughnasadh festivals was climbing sacred hills. So there was a hill called the Tailteann, which I don't know if I'm going to have that pronunciation right, but the Tailteann was a hill, or it continues to be a hill in Telltown, Ireland. And to this day, people still climb that hill. And so I think where this practice comes from is, if you think back to the story of Taltu, it was basically her physical exertion. It was required, right, to harvest the crops, to bring those to the people. And so when followers of Lugh and Teal'c would climb this hill later in honor and celebration of her, it was like to honor the feat that she did climbing this hill. And then when you get there, of course, you've made it to the top and you have pushed your body through this physical feat. Now, hopefully you're not pushing your body through this physical feat that would make you sick or something like that. But that is where a practice like that comes from. And then there would probably also be music and storytelling in addition to everything, the games and the contests and everything else that was going on. Now, in Christianity, later they add an additional holiday called Lammas or Lammas Tide. And I think that the holiday, I'm not Catholic myself, so this is Catholic Christians, and the Lammas Tide, or it translates to loaf mass, or Lammas Mass translates to loaf mass. So this was a blessing of the first bread. So you could see the connections between Lughnasadh, where we bless the first crops. So we bless the wheat and the grains that are being harvested at that time. So in Catholic Christianity, at least in the beginning, when Lammas Tide or Lammas Mass was first created, it would be a blessing of the first bread. Now, it doesn't take a genius to see that paganism came before Christianity, and Christians then placed certain holidays right at important pagan holidays. So this often had to do with the difficulty of converting the people, the pagans of the land, to the new religion, Christianity. And so they would slide holidays that were very similar to a pagan holiday right next to the pagan holiday, and it was a little bit easier to convert people. So you will see this with Ostara and Easter. You know, we see this with Yule and Christmas, and then we see this here with Lughnasadh and with Lammas Tide, or Lammas Mass, Loaf Mass. Overall, Lughnasadh is an interplay between prosperity and sacrifice. So again, like I said earlier, I don't ever really do a Lughnasadh or lead people in a Lughnasadh ritual that doesn't include both elements of those two things. So why don't we talk a bit about the energy of the season, but I'm going to go back to the chat and just see. Chelsea said she likes to bake bread and burn John barleycorn, so like burning the effigy in the token of the sacrifice I have given or will give. Yeah, so that is an important aspect too, is like you can burn something in like symbolically of the sacrifice that you will eventually give, and then you can also find other ways that you can give a sacrifice later as well. And just saying hi to Stephanie also, who is joining us. So Mary Meet. So again, and share in the chat like any other practices that you have done for Lughnasadh, and then if you're resonating with any of the suggestions I'm going to give too, we'd love to hear. So let's talk about the energy of the season. So the sun has begun its descent. Now remember, the sun began its descent back at Lugh at summer solstice. But back then, nobody really recognizes it, or you don't feel it as much as you start to feel it at Lughnasadh. So like by now, you'll start to notice that the sun is setting a little bit earlier, just a tiny bit earlier, but what we're really starting to shorten the day is at the beginning of the day, because sunrise is starting to get later and later at this point. So when we are at summer solstice, we are at the longest day, and then when we get to Yule, of course, we're at the shortest day. Lughnasadh is like, a third of the way through that period of time, and or I guess a quarter of the way through that period of time. And when we get to Mabon, or fall equinox, we'll be halfway through the waning half of the year. So by now we're starting to feel it. It's still summer. We still experience the height of the summer if we're in the northern hemisphere. But we're starting to notice the descent of the sun. The waning half of the year has begun. It's starting to become more and more evident. Now, at this point, this is true that energetically abundance is at its height, but it is shifting more towards introspection. As soon as we pass Lughnasadh, we really are starting to shift more into that introspective part of the wheel. Keywords for Lughnasadh are like ripening. So if you want to think about how like these energies play out in your own life, you might think about like what is ripe right now in your own life, what's ripe for harvest. Gratitude. The gratitude is often an intention more so at Mabon. There is an element of gratitude here at Lughnasadh, so being grateful for the harvest that we've been given, whatever that looks like in our own lives. Sacrifice, acknowledging that it's impossible for us to live without something else dying, right? And it's impossible for the wheel of the year to turn. It's impossible. We can't always be living at the height of summer solstice. So eventually the wheel turns and it shifts us into that kind of down, that part where we are going deeper down into our own unconscious, perhaps, or starting to turn more inward. We are recognizing the sacrifice that is made by the land and by us, and by every living thing to be here, right, on Earth. And then there's also this element, kind of a key word here would be endurance. So think about Taltu, right? The endurance that it took for her to till that land, or the followers of Taltu who continue to climb the Taltian Hill in Teltown, Ireland. So the endurance that it takes to climb a hill like that, or perhaps the endurance that it takes for you to put forward the things that you want out of this life, and kind of create and manifest the things you want. It takes endurance. We don't always get what we want the first time. So, we have a couple of choices. We can give up, right? Or we can keep going. And I think that Lughnasadh especially tells us that message: keep going. Even if you haven't gotten exactly what you want, keep going. Keep going, keep putting in the effort, keep putting in the work, and eventually you will be rewarded. So, questions for reflection at Lughnasadh. What am I harvesting in my life right now? So, what do your harvests look like? What would you like to harvest in your life right now? I think there's like a little spider that just came down right there. What is what's asked to be released, like chaff from grain? So I come from one side of my family are they're farmers, and we still own property in Indiana where there's a farm, and so like when you go to harvest grain, you have to take the chaff off of it, or it's not edible, right? So like chaff off the grain, what is the thing we need to remove? We need to release and take away so that we can be we have something that sustains us. Where am I being asked to grow up or step up responsibly or step up my responsibility? So think about like, Tialtu, she did what she had to do. She put in the effort to make sure that the land was prepared for her people. So where in your life do you need to step up the responsibility? So these are all just questions to ponder and reflect on. You can reflect on them in your journaling. You could reflect on them through tarot cards or through your whatever divination technique you use. But it's always, I think it's always good to reflect during any Sabbath and see where we are, where we land at that point in the wheel. So let's now shift into ways to celebrate. Sonia said, "Old relations end for new lives to begin." Exactly. That there's that saying. It's very cliche. Like when a door closes, a window opens, or when a door closes, another one opens, and it's cliche, but it's also true. There's very much truth to it. Something has to end for something new to begin. We can't really, we don't have as much space to begin something when we're still clinging and clutching on to the thing that we're letting go. And I think very much that is what our transition into the darker half of the wheel is about. But especially here at Lughnasadh, what are we giving away? What are we giving up in order to move on to what we really want? So let us talk about ways to celebrate Lughnasadh. So like I said earlier, this is one of my favorite Sabbats. I love all the Sabbats, but I really, really have always loved this one. People have heard me talk about it. I love Imbolc as well. They are at opposite ends of the wheel. And so it's like, you know, whenever we look at the wheel of the year as it turns, I think it's always important from our vantage point to look backwards 6 months to where we were 6 months ago. So there's many valuable reasons for this. Astrologically, a full moon at one point, at any point in the wheel, will be in the same sign as the new moon on the opposite side of the wheel. So things that kind of start at a new moon in a certain sign, they will often resolve or end when they get to the same sign of the full moon on the opposite side. And so the same thing kind of goes with Sabbats. Like when we look across the wheel at Imbolc is all about maybe sometimes planting internal seeds, like creating plans, honoring the sacred light within, taking vows. What is it that we vow, that we promise to or pledge to do in this next 6 months? And then when here we get all the way to the other side of the wheel, we get to Lughnasadh, and now it's about like, well, what has come of that? What came of our plans? What came of our intentions? And then what are we going to do with it? And then how are we going to give back? So ways to celebrate Lughnasadh. So kitchen witchery, I think, is always great. It's great for any Sabbath, especially here at Lughnasadh. It's fantastic to do some kind of kitchen witchery because this, all the Sabbats can be food-based, but Lughnasadh is especially food-based because this is the harvest of the grains. So people may bake bread or bake something else that has grains in it, cornbread. And what I recommend doing is not just baking it for the ritual or for your gathering or whatever you're doing, but bake it with intentions, bake the intentions in. So I've talked about this before, and I hope that she will do it again. But the maiden of our coven, Beth, she at several Lughnasadhs, she baked bread, and then she made these like little fortunes or little like affirmations or even divinations, and then she would bake them into, she would like basically type them or wrote them onto a piece of paper, and then she baked them into the bread. And so then when people broke the bread during cakes and ale of the ritual, they got this little fortune, something that they could carry with them, through Lughnasadh season. And I always think that's such a cool idea. So if you are a baker, and honestly, you don't have to bake your bread from scratch. You can even like, let's say you got those crescent rolls from Pillsbury or something, you can just roll the paper into the roll when you're making it. And you can do something like this. So I love that idea. And or you could put different intentions into the bread or the grains or whatever you are making. So since this is especially a time of abundance and prosperity, you could put into whatever you're making, what part of your life do you want to be prosperous in? Do you need more money? Is there a certain job that you've got your eye on? Are you looking for to be more abundant in love, like self-love and love of others? Are you looking for a partner? Are you looking for healing? Maybe you need an abundance of health, healthy energy, something like that. So the intention can be um, you know personalized for you, whatever it is. Abundance and prosperity is a big intention, and you can individualize that for wherever you are, for whatever it is that you need more growth of in your life, or you want to expand, whatever that thing is. Something else you can do is you can bless grains. So if you have a garden, if you harvest things yourself, you could bring that whatever's coming in from the garden, and you could bless all of that. It doesn't just have to be grains, but Lughnasadh is typically the blessing of the grains, but you can bless any part of your harvest. You could also buy grains, and you could bless those as well. You can infuse seasonal foods like berries, grains, root vegetables, whatever is growing in your garden or seems to be fresh at the farmers markets. You could infuse those with intention. As you're cooking, you can stir clockwise to bring your intention into the food. And you can also bless it as you put it in the oven if it's something you're baking. But I always think that food magic, especially at Lughnasadh, is a great thing to do. Because again, remember, going back to the story of where this all comes from, Teal'c was trying to create sustenance for her people. So bringing that back in a lot of ways, that also honors her. Now, something else that we can do is making offerings to the land. So this would honor Teal'c's sacrifice as well. So it would be great if you, let's say you did idea number one, where you were baking bread or you were blessing food of some kind. You can take some of that bread, fruit, or maybe it doesn't even have to be something you baked. Maybe you're not a baker, I'm not. But you could bring flowers, or you could bring anything really to a tree, to a river. Sometimes people place the blessings at a stone, and I think that, or like stone, large stones that they might find in nature. And I think that goes back to like the standing stones are so sacred to to people in parts of Europe, right? So placing these sacrifices at the stone. It's also said that like kind of fairies tend to gravitate around areas like that. So you can make your sacrifice or make your offerings to them. But leaving your offerings at places in nature honors not only Teal'c's sacrifice, but also honors the land greatly, right? And another idea is finding out the name of the indigenous peoples that first lived in the land where you lived, and honoring them through what you leave as well. You can thank the spirits of the land or your ancestors for their support. So there's a lot that you can do wrapped around kind of giving these offerings to the land. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about was sacrifice. So it was gratitude. Now, gratitude is oftentimes, again, like I said, I always bring gratitude into the Mabon rituals. But there is, once we kind of start the harvest, the three harvest festivals, which starts with Lughnasadh as the first harvest of the wheel, Mabon is the second harvest of the wheel. That's usually called the harvest of the fruits and maybe the vegetables, whereas Lughnasadh is the harvest of the grains, and then Samhain is the third harvest, and in ancient times was the harvest of meat. So this would be where the remainder of the cattle or any of the animals that they were not going to bring with them through into winter would be slaughtered and sacrificed and honored. and that food would then sustain people through the winter. So there's an element of gratitude. There should be an element of gratitude at each of these Sabbats, including Samhain, because again, this is like about the sacrifice. It's what keeps us going through the winter months, that keeps us going through the dark half of the wheel. So if you want to honor gratitude, or you want to bring gratitude into your life at Lughnasadh, you could write a list of what you have harvested this year and what you are thankful for. Again, that's a practice you could also do at Mabon. You could burn or bury a slip of paper where you name off the things that you are ready to release and let go of as well. So there's always these ways that we can find gratitude. You know, you could make a gratitude inventory. That's something that I often suggest people do at Mabon, but you could also do it at Lughnasadh. So just take time to kind of freely write about all the things that you're grateful for. Sometimes we don't pause and do that enough. And these Sabbats remind us to slow down and really think about what is the energy that surrounds us right now. So let me just go back to the chat, and Sam was saying, you know, every Sabbat is balanced by the opposite Sabbat in the Southern Hemisphere. Imbolc in London matches Lughnasadh in Sydney. Yeah, exactly. So when we're at the Northern Hemisphere and we're celebrating one Sabbat, they will be celebrating the opposite from us on the other side of the wheel. But again, it's also a way for us to reflect back on, you know, what did we do at that opposite Sabbat, and then how much have we grown in the 6 months that have passed since then. Okay. So here's a couple of other ideas, different ways that we can celebrate Lughnasadh. So candle ritual for Lugh, and we can also do a candle ritual for Teal'c, or you could combine these together. So if we want to honor Lugh, what we are really doing is we're honoring, we might be honoring the light within us. You could choose a candle representative of the sun. So I like yellow or gold or orange for that. You could carve into it anything that you want to honor him with. You could carve his name into it as you honor him. You could also do this. So like as you light this candle and you do it on one end, you're doing it to honor him, and you could talk to him about why you're honoring him, what you feel that you want to tell him. But you can also then ask him to help you call in your own skill, your courage, or you think of all of these qualities that Lugh embodies, bringing in your courage, maybe bringing in clarity, because he is a sun god. So anytime we have sun gods, they can shine light onto things that are often hidden in the shadows for us. So asking him to give you clarity, to shine that light on you for the second half of the year. And then if you honor both the Lord and the Lady, both the god and the goddess in your rituals, you could also honor Teal'c at this time. So since she is an embodiment of the earth, I would suggest a green candle to represent her, and you can honor her sacrifice. So you could thank her for the sacrifice that she made, not just for you, but for all people. You could talk to her about the sacrifices that you are going to make or that you would like to make. And just sit with these two candles and kind of commune with the deities in this way. So a lot of times people ask, how do you work with the deities? This is a great first step, is lighting candles for them. You could do some research on them. You could learn about symbols that are related to each of the deities and carve those into the candles. You could make sigils here if you wanted. But a great way to honor a god and a goddess is to light candles and sit with them. And just speak to them like you would speak to a friend, you know, and tell them why you're honoring them, why you're so blessed to be pagan, right, or a witch or Wiccan, why you are here celebrating this important turning point in the wheel. You know, what are you sacrificing? What is the prosperity that you're bringing in? And you can make a whole little ritual just out of that. And at the same time, you are honoring these deities and connecting to them. So I will talk a bit about the other deities. So Lugh and Teal'c are not the only deities that you can work with. I will talk about a bit about that a little bit later. But let's talk about crafts creative expression. So Lughnasadh, like any sabbat, you can do crafts. Lughnasadh is especially a good one to do crafts because remember, Lugh is a craftsman and he was very, very skilled. You do not have to be skilled at crafts to do crafts. I am not very skilled at this, but nevertheless, I enjoy doing them and kind of getting into the magic of the season. So one thing that you can do is to create a corn dolly. I have personally never made one myself because, as I have explained, I am not the most crafty. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the chat a link that I pulled up for you earlier. And this explains how to make one. It should be pretty simple, but if you don't like these instructions, you can always go and you can look up how to make a corn dolly, and you will find other websites that will show you how. So the corn dolly is very traditional at Mabon. So first of all, because it is a grain harvest, wheat and corn, these are kind of the main things that people are harvesting at this time. And so the corn dolly uses dried corn husks to create this doll, and then this doll could be sacrificed. There's a lot of things you could do with it. You could then burn it if you wanted to. That could be your effigy that you burn to kind of represent to sacrifice to the land. You could keep the corn dolly. This is what many people will do. So they'll honor it at Lughnasadh. It might be on their altar or somewhere prominent in their home. And then you would keep it for the 6 months until you get to Imbolc on the other side of the wheel. And then people will use it as their breed's doll. So I won't get into it a lot because that's a different sabbat, but the breed's dolly is typically a doll often made out of dried corn husks, and people will put it in a bed called a breed's bed. They'll often put it near the hearth of their home if they have a fireplace or somewhere prominent in their home. And this doll represents the goddess Breed and also kind of represents Imbolc in many parts of the world is a very dark time. It could be the coldest and the darkest of any of the sabbats. I know that from living in Boston. It was always like very, very cold during this time, very dark, no light, right? And so the Breed's doll represents Breed and the hope that the light is returning. So you can use your corn dolly that you make at Lughnasadh and then make it into your Breed's dolly at Imbolc. So check out that link I put there. If you're watching back later on YouTube, the link will be below in the comments as well. Now, other things that you can make are wreaths. Wreaths are great to make at any time of the turning of the wheel. They are circular, right? So they are like the wheel. They also represent the sun because they are circular as well. And so I think it's really fun to take a wreath. Like if you're really good at this, you could actually weave the wreath yourself, or you can buy one at Michael's that's already been made. And then I like to take ribbons and make a pentacle inside of the wreath, but you can also decorate the wreath with anything you want that represents the themes of Lughnasadh. So whether it's like wheat, pieces of wheat, corn husks, flowers, like anything that you feel is kind of representative of Lughnasadh for you, you could then decorate your wreath with that. And then, of course, you can also make the witch's ladder, which will segue us into prosperity magic. So let's talk about the witch's ladder. So this is a very traditional thing that we, in our tradition, the midnight tradition of Wicca, we always make a witch's ladder at Lughnasadh in our in-person coven celebration. So here's what a witch's ladder looks like, but they're all different. So basically, a witch's ladder is something where you braid together some kind of ribbons or yarn, and at the very simplest form, it's essentially you just get like a key ring or some kind of a circular ring, and then you begin to make your braid on it. And you can see I've got like some charms and stuff hanging off of here. You don't have to get fancy with it. You could literally just braid this. Now, as you braid a witch's ladder, to me, this is meditation. So you shouldn't, try not to be distracted during it. Don't be talking to a bunch of people. That's what I always tell people in our coven. Like, really, this is your meditation. And as you start to braid the strands of the witch's ladder together, you think about your intention. So you could visualize what it would look like to draw in the prosperity that you desire. Witches' ladders are typically about prosperity, though you could weave any intention into it. But at Lughnasadh, we usually have some kind of, we ask people like, what is the type of prosperity that you're looking for? Try to hone in on that very specifically, and then weave that intention into the witch's ladder. And I found this to be very effective magic, especially if I get very specific about what I want. Like in years past, I would be like, I need this many hours at my job, as I was a consultant. I need this many hours in my job to support myself, and so I would weave that into the witch's ladder. Or I need this much pay, or I need, I usually do it around kind of like money prosperity, but you can do it about any kind of prosperity or abundance that you want. If you wanted to weave in the charms, what I recommend doing is getting like beading elastic that you could get at a place like Michael's or any craft store. And then I would tie that onto the ring along with the ribbons or the yarn that you're using. And you're just going to weave that elastic in. And then at whatever point you want to put a charm or a bead on there, then you can just string that onto the elastic, and then you continue beading around it. I've put feathers on these in the past. There's a lot that you can do with it. And then what you want to do is hang these somewhere in your house. You could do it outside, you could do it inside. But we have tons of witches' ladders all over because we always make them at Lughnasadh, so I have a lot of these. But one of my absolute favorite crafts for Lughnasadh, and one of my absolute favorite types of magic, is this weaving of braids and the witch's ladder. So hopefully you enjoy that. Try that out, and really use the weaving part of it as your meditation. You can say your intention, you can repeat it over and over again like a mantra or an affirmation, or like I said, you could visualize what it would look like to have that intention. So a lot of great things that you could do with a witch's ladder. Now, other ways to work with prosperity magic at Lughnasadh or abundance magic is also not magic. So if you don't want to go all out and do this big, extensive witch's ladder, you could just do not magic, where you get yarn or cord or ribbon, and you tie knots into it. And the number of knots can vary, but it's very typical to use 9. And with each knot that you tie, you can say a little saying. You can actually Google knot magic spell, and you'll see there's like a little chant that people do, and it'll probably come up when you Google that. There's a little chant that you do. If I find it, I will put it in the comments as well. And then you do your knots, and then as you tie your knots, again, you're kind of thinking about your intention, what is the prosperity or abundance that you're drawing in, or you try to visualize it while you're doing that. Now, another thing you can do is bless coins when you're doing prosperity magic. So I love this as an element of bringing in that idea of sacrifice. So what I will often tell people to do is bring coins to a Lughnasadh ritual. We bless them inside of the ritual, and then afterwards you take those coins and you give them to someone else. So I usually carry them in my bag until I find somebody who is like asking for money, or it looks like they're in need, and then I would give them this bag of coins. And what I suggest is don't just give them like 10 pennies or something. I tell people bring substantial coins, like quarters, bring like $3 or $4 worth of it, so that what you're giving to somebody is substantial, because in this day and age, pennies aren't going very far in this world, right? So I've started carrying $10 bills around with me, so that when I see someone asking for money, I hand them a $10 bill rather than just a quarter, because what are they going to do with that quarter, right? So this is just another way that, so you could bless those coins in the Lughnasadh ritual in space, and then you go out and you find somebody to give them to, and it can be just a fun way to, to do that aspect of sacrifice. You can also make sachets where you get herbs that are connected to money and prosperity or abundance. So I like mint and bay leaves and basil, cinnamon, different things like that. And you can put all of the herbs into a piece of cloth, and then you tie that up with a ribbon, and then you can charge it with your intentions, and you can carry it with you. I like to sometimes hang them over the doors. But again, you're just putting into the sachet all of your intentions of prosperity. So what all of these things have in common is your intention, and these are just different means of doing something symbolic around that intention. You can also do sigil magics. You can create a sigil out of the words like I draw in abundant energy or whatever your specific intention is, and create a sigil around that and then carve that into a candle and burn it. So just a lot of different ways that we can do some prosperity magic. So Felicia said she loves making witches' ladders. I do too. Sonia said she's going to try to make one, and we may be making them in our public Lughnasadh ritual. We haven't decided yet if we're going to do that or not magic. But yeah, try it. Definitely try it. I love making them. Let's see here. So merry meet to everybody. And Misty said, who keeps making the mad faces? It's very annoying. Yeah, that would be very annoying. I didn't see them. There's mad faces, huh? That's not cool. If somebody doesn't like the episode, they should just get off the episode and stop making mad faces at us, right? um, okay. Felicia said her daughter also loves doing not magic. And Taliesin said it's so simple and so powerful. Yeah, so simple and so a lot of these techniques, sigils, not magic, all of these things, so simple and so magical. Yeah. So all right. So let us talk a little bit more about sacrifice, and then I wanted to share with you some deities, a little bit of shadow work you can do for the season, and then I have a little for your consideration at the end. I want to tell you historically what some of our witch ancestors did on August 1st. So sacrifice, like I said, is an important concept at Lughnasadh or whenever working with prosperity or abundance. So you want to think about like where could you give back. So the coins is a nice starting point. Blessing the coins in the ritual. What I like to do when I bless those coins is I bless them and then I put into like that into the coins the intention that when I give these to somebody, I'm not just giving them like $3 or $4 worth of change. I'm giving them much, much, much more. So when I hand the bag to them, I always think in my mind, like seeing them being like flooded with abundance. So that something really great happens to the person that will hopefully lift them out of the situation they're in. And it's not just about my coins, it's about like this moment starting a cascade of abundance and prosperity for that person. So you can kind of think about where could you give back. So you can start with the coins, right? You could donate time, you could donate money, you could donate food or kindness to people. Just simply being kind and talking to someone can be a sacrifice too. When you're, maybe you're very busy, but you stop what you're doing in order to help somebody else. Now, it's important for us to remember to sacrifice overgave, right? So I think there's a lesson in the story that we could all learn, especially me, is that when we give too much, we will become exhausted eventually. So you don't want to give so much that you drain yourself. You can't give your life savings to somebody. You can't give all the energy that you have to somebody. So you have to be well aware of where your limits are when giving, right? So that you give enough that it feels like it's a good sacrifice, but you're not giving the part that you need for yourself, right? So don't give away your last dollar. You have to, there's such reality with put your mask on first before you help everybody else out on that airplane that's going down, right? So we have to remember that very much. So on one hand, the sacrifice should be a bit painful. So don't give them 10 pennies, give them something more. Don't give people a minute of your time, try to give something a little substantial, but at the same time, balancing that out with like, don't give too much. Okay. So it's like very much about finding the balance of where to sacrifice, how much sacrifice can I give without giving so much that I'm sacrificing myself. Right. So next week, we're going to be talking about the Lionsgate portal, and so you'll see there's some kind of extensions of this episode into that next one. Lionsgate portal is a great period of time when we open up this like kind of energetic portal. I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end. But you can continue to do some of this magic through into the Lionsgate portal as well. But let's talk about the deities. Okay, so we've already mentioned Sun God and Earth Mother. These are great choices for honoring deities at this time. If you want a truly traditional Lughnasadh, you would honor like Lugh and Teal'c. But other deities you can look for to honor are dying and resurrected gods. So, like Tammuz, Adonis, anybody who has kind of a dying or resurrected story, like Osiris. In Joseph Fraser's book, he talks very much about the flooding of the Nile and the myth of Osiris and Isis and Horus, and how like there's this sacrificed god across many different cultures and pantheons. So if you find that kind of sacrificial god, that's another god that can work here. It's not always a god who sacrifices himself. It sometimes is a goddess like Inanna, who sacrifices her role as Queen of Heaven to descend down into the underworld to honor her brother Enki. No, it's not, is it? I can't remember her brother's name, but she goes down into the underworld to honor her brother, and she makes that sacrifice of stripping herself bare. So any deity that descends down into the underworld is also good to work with here, or again has that kind of resurrected god goddess style. Demeter or Ceres would also be a good one. I always think of like Persephone at starting at Mabon and Samhain, because that's really when she descends down into the underworld. But any gods that descend, any gods that are sacrificed are very good to work with here. Other ideas for deities, deities of abundance. So in many years we have worked with Lakshmi, a great goddess for abundance, and then Ganesha, the remover of obstacles. So any deities that are kind of like have abundant energy, Venus. Like the Lionsgate portal is on Friday this year, 8/8. Venus could be like a great goddess to work with because it's her day as well, and then she's a goddess of abundance. But this is just not this is not an exhaustive list of deities you can work with, but at least gives you some ideas to get you started. And then another thing to think about is movement and doing and making some connections outdoors. So think about Teal'c's story, climbing the Teal'c. We see her followers climbing the Teal'c in Tailtown, Ireland, on Lughnasadh. You could walk barefoot as just a way to connect to the earth, right? You don't have to walk up the hill barefoot, but you could walk around your yard or a park barefoot and just really ground and connect to the earth. But you could hike to a nearby hill and then hike up that nearby hill and really think about the sacrifice that Teal'c made. You could watch the sunrise or the sunset from that hill and kind of reflect on, what is setting in your life versus what is rising, and consider all of this a ritual as you do so. Like I absolutely feel that hiking is a ritual when we focus on what's going on inside of us as we're doing it. So I'm planning to climb a mountain. I'm planning to climb a mountain to basically honor Teal'c and kind of think about her sacrifice. So as far as shadow work goes, this is shadow work is good at any time of the wheel, but at Lughnasadh, it's about thinking about what what can we sacrifice? It's Lughnasadh really is the evident beginning of that sort of inward spiral. So if you think of like from Yule to Litha, you can kind of think of that as the outward spiral, right, out into the world. And you think from Litha back to Yule as being the inward spiral back into us. And so think about where have you overextended yourself, or where have you burnt yourself out? So that would be a really good question to contemplate in your shadow work, whether journaling or climbing that hill, or if you can't climb a hill, that's okay too. If you're just walking, just think about these prompts. What seeds in my life need pulling before fall, right? We root out the things that they're gonna harm the harvest. And so what are the weeds that you need to pull up or root out of your life so that your fall harvest is abundant? What am I clinging to that no longer serves me? So what am I holding on to here at Lughnasadh as we tip deeper into the dark half of the wheel? What am I holding on to that would help me that isn't serving me? And if I let go of that thing, it would help drive me closer to the thing that I want. So I wanted to end here before I go into the Q&A. I just wanted to offer this for your consideration, an interesting story that many people don't think about when they think about Lughnasadh. But on August 1st, 1940, it is said, now people have disputed this story, and I think there's probably some truth to the story, and I think some of this is also made up. So you're going to take it with a grain of salt. I'm just offering this for your consideration. And you can do some research on it if you'd like. I did a lot of research on this in the past, and there seem to be disparities between the different stories. But on August 1st, 1940, it is said that Gerald Gardner, some stories it says he came upon witches who were doing a ritual on August 1st, 1940. Remember, August 1st is traditional Lughnasadh. He came upon this group of witches in New Forest who were performing a ritual that was aimed to prevent the Nazi invasion of Britain at that time. And this was later called the Operation Cone of Power. It is said that they raised this cone of power and they directed it towards Hitler to stop him from being able to invade Britain. Was their goal, because they were British residents. So it's said, just weeks before August 1st, 1940, the British Army at Dunkirk had made the narrow escape. And so the UK at this time was bracing for an invasion from the Nazi armies. And so the witches here in New Forest decided that they would try to do something to stop it. And so I just think it's a very interesting story. I offer it for your consideration. And it said that they raised this cone of power. They directed it towards Hitler to kind of addle his brain in some of the stories it says. And we know history, and we know that he did not ever invade Britain or make landfall on British soil, at least on the island, right? But and we could explain it away by saying, other things happened. But the witches who did that spell, they believed that they were at least a part of repelling that thing from happening. So interesting story connected to Lughnasadh. I just wanted to offer that to you because it's very interesting and probably timely as well. So let us now segue into the Q&A. Before I do though, let's I think I already mentioned the dates of Lughnasadh, and astrological Lughnasadh is from the 7th to the 8th. So you can actually combine Lughnasadh with Lionsgate Portal, which is on the 8th, and you can put the two together in a ritual, which is what we're going to do in our own coven. So let's see if anybody has anything for the Q&A, and then I'll tell you a little bit about our ritual, invite you to that if you would like to join us. So, okay. Felicia said that story is fascinating. Yes, a very fascinating story and very timely as well. So, okay, if anybody has anything for the Q&A, so I didn't have anything that was left for me this week to answer, but I'd love if you're here live, put questions into the chat. It doesn't have to be about Lughnasadh. It can be about anything related to witchcraft, shadow work, energy work, and put those in the chat if you would like. And let me just show you, I always forget my show and tell, but I had pulled some books up here. So while I'm waiting for some questions, I'll just, or to see if there are any questions, let me show you some books. So this comes from the Llewellyn Sabbat series. So this is the Lammas book, Gathering the Feasts of the Fruits of the First Harvest. This one's by Anna Franklin and Paul Maskin. And you can just find this by looking up the Llewellyn Sabbat series. So there are 8 books. I highly recommend this series, and I recommend buying them. What I did when I was younger, I got these books probably like 25 years ago, is I just bought them every Sabbath, and then over the course of the year, I had the whole entire series. So great book. It will tell you some of the lore that I talked about, as well as much more. It will tell you about different things to do. There are rituals in here for solitaries and for groups. There's children's activities. There are songs. There are recipes. There are correspondences. So highly, highly recommended, especially if you're a witch who celebrates the wheel. If you would like a book that sort of packs all the sabbats in together. Here's another one by Adaine McCoy, which I highly recommend. So this one's just called The Sabbats. This book is probably at least 30 years old, but great book. And it goes through kind of the same similar thing. It's going to have all of the lore and activities and recipes and deities and correspondences, but you'll have less of it because the whole book is, it's 8 different sabbats packed into this one book, as opposed to the series where you have like an entire book for one sabbat. And then there is another book, like I got this so long ago. So this one is Celebrate the Earth. This one's by Laurie Cabot. It's a smaller book, but I love it too. And it also goes through all of the sabbats as well. So just wanted to show and tell if you are interested in learning more about the sabbats and you want to add to your book collection. Check those out. So coming up on 8/5, so next Tuesday, I'll be doing an episode on the Lionsgate portal. So we're going to dive into what is the Lionsgate portal. I'm going to dive into why many witches connect it to Lughnasadh, what you can do with it. And essentially it's a vortex of kind of energy that opens up, and we have this space to really tap into this abundance of the time. So I will be talking about that. And then on 8/8, Friday 8/8, we have a public Lughnasadh ritual, public Lughnasadh and Lionsgate portal ritual on the Lionsgate, right at the peak time. We're going to do it. It is a prosperity ritual. We would love for you to join us. So if you are in our Shadow Seekers membership, or you are already a member of Coven of Midnight's Flame, an initiate of Coven of Midnight's Flame, your tickets are provided for you for that. But if you are not a member of either of those groups, you can join us as well. So just look for some information coming later. Probably by the end of this week, I will put it up, and you'll be able to purchase a ticket through a donation of any amount, and you can join us. At this time, I don't know if we're making witches' ladders or not magic or something, but we're going to be doing prosperity magic, and probably working with Lugh and Teal'c at that ritual. So you can check that out on 8/8. Look for more to come. I do have a money magic workshop that's coming soon. I do not have the date set, but it's looking to be, it will be mid-August. That will then open up the doors to our Demystifying Witchcraft course for those who would like to join us there. If you like what you kind of see during that workshop, if you want to take your witchcraft deeper, this course is great for those who are beginning witches who just want like a step-by-step, takes you through all the basics of, how to feel more confident as a witch. But even those who have been witches for a very long time appreciate the course, because sometimes people have never had traditional training before and they just like it. Or sometimes people just want everything all in one place, or they just want to brush up on things they learned a long time ago. So it's a great course for both new witches and witches who've been on the path for a while as well. So you can check that out. That's going to be coming in August after the Money Magic workshop, the free Money Magic workshop. And then we're going to be having a flash sale in September, I think. Like, we're not officially opening up Shadow Seekers. Like, I'm not doing a big launch like I often do in September, but we will be opening up the membership for like 48 to 72 hours for anybody who wants to join us, because then it will be closed again until the end of the year. So our Shadow Seekers membership is for those who want to take their spiritual practice to the next level, dive in and do some deep shadow work and energy work with us, and kind of increase your intuition and your confidence and your abilities as a witch. Whereas the course is more about learning the basics of witchcraft. So let me go and check to see what is in the, if there's anything in the chat. So Sam asked, is Lughnasadh the Sabbat at which the summer games are held? Probably that. I think that if I understand the question correctly, Lughnasadh is a Sabbat where you would have like summer games. And so sometimes people will even connect it to like the county fairs that occur here in the United States and other countries as well. It's like they're an extension of Lughnasadh. And I personally think it's probably like people who came from areas where, like, at least in the United States, like where I grew up in Indiana in the middle of cornfields, the county fair was like the only thing to do in the middle of the summer. And there was all these games and rides and everything like that. People would bring their, to this day still exists, would bring their harvests there, and they would judge like things that people grew or animals that people had raised. And so I think it's an extension of this idea that like our ancient ancestors were celebrating sort of these summer games, and that sort of extends into these county fairs. So it's always weird to me as somebody from Indiana when the county fairs are like, I think in LA they've already happened or something, because I think of them as being like in the middle of the summer, like in August. But I do think that what your question is asking is that Lughnasadh would be the Sabbath most tied to summer games. Absolutely. Okay. So I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to take off. But as usual, I love spending Tuesday nights with you guys. I'll go back if I missed any questions. Sometimes it's hard for me to catch all the comments as they're going through, but I will go back afterwards, make sure I answer or reply to anything I didn't talk about during the live. Make sure to leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere in this feed, and that will help us get it out to more people. If you would like to, if you are not already on our mailing list, I encourage you to sign up for our mailing list. I'm going to put the link in the chat here. For those who watch back live on YouTube or watch back in replay later on YouTube, this link is also in the description of the video. You can sign up there. It will put you on our mailing list, and it will also send you a free copy of The Witch's Guide to Shadow Work. And then this way you won't miss out on any of the future things that are coming, like an invite to our Lughnasadh ritual, an invite to that free money magic workshop that's coming up, and everything like that. Make sure to subscribe to our Body, Mind, Witchcraft YouTube channel if you haven't already, and help us out and watch some of our past videos. We are trying to get to 4,000 video view hours in one calendar year, and then we'll be able to be monetized. So help us out by doing that. And if you have any questions or comments that didn't get answered here, please leave them in the chat. Even if it's after the video is over, it's in replay, and I always go back and I'll answer whatever was left for me. All right, well, until next time, blessed be, happy Lughnasadh, happy opening of Lughnasadh season, and I will see you next week, and we will discuss the Lionsgate portal. Until next time, blessed be.